What is about to be presented here are possible scenarios that could potentially take place in the not-too-distant future. While our government has shown great diligence and has struck a powerful blow in the war against terrorism, the fact remains that terrorism is like a cancer and must continually be fought and contained. It is not just simply going to go away. To maintain our lifestyle as freedom-loving people, we must all become more responsible. By becoming more aware of the nature of terrorism, and by preparing ourselves, our families, and our loved ones for the unpleasant realities and dangers of our time, we can reduce its threat. That is the purpose of this film.
You will remember this day as long as you live.
Oh, another one just hit.
Oh, this is terrifying, awful. It would obviously be some sort of a concerted attack.
The scene is horrific. One of the two towers literally collapsed. And the building literally began to collapse before us. And I am now standing in a black cloud of smoke.
It can't get much worse than this, let's hope. Another explosion that has taken place at the Pentagon. We have the heart of the financial district of America being attacked.
Our way of life, our very freedom came under attack.
Hello, I'm Ken Klein, producer of this video series. You know, we have come to a historic and climactic moment in human history, a confluence of current events that are coming together all at the same time, a time of great frustration and anxiety for millions of Americans. Over the past couple of years, we have watched the explosion and then the implosion of the internet, wreaking havoc on people's portfolios and plans of retirement. And then the more clear and present danger, global terrorism. Let me ask you a question. I know the people of New York could answer the question since 9/11, but what would you do if there was a biological, chemical, or nuclear event that happened nearby you? What would you do? Do you know what you do? Do you have a plan, a strategy? Do you have provisions in the event of the unthinkable? This information, this specific information, was created so that you wouldn't panic in the event that that would happen. The time to prepare is now.
At a small uncontrolled airport in Southern California, the operator of the airport watched as an expensive car pulled into his parking lot. A Middle Eastern man emerged from the car and made his way to the office. He was inquiring about a certain type of aircraft that was fast and had the capacity to carry large cargoes. But to the operator of the small airport, the man was asking all the wrong questions. With suspicions significantly raised, the man left. But the operator managed to take pictures of the car and license plate. The FBI was contacted, and they confirmed later the man was an Al-Qaeda operative that had been sought by the FBI since 9/11. Was he planning to poison a freshwater reservoir only 2 miles from the airport?
Behind me is the largest earthen dam in North America. It holds over half the drinking water of all of Southern California. Imagine if a terrorist were to poison that water with cyanide or botulism, smallpox, flu, or even the plague. It's hard to comprehend that kind of devastation. Now, we can live about 30 days without food. We can only live about 3 to 5 days without drinking water.
Even before 9/11, farmers learned anti-terrorism measures because of the risk of attacks from various violent domestic groups opposed to everything from drinking milk to growing genetically modified corn seed. Agroterrorism is perhaps one of the oldest forms of terrorism. During World War I, the Germans conducted a covert biological campaign using anthrax and other substances to infect draft horses and mules used by the Allies. They also used wheat fungus to ruin crops. By World War II, the Germans dropped potato beetles in England, ruining the potato crop. In 1970, the water supply of a 1,000-acre ranch was poisoned by terrorists with cyanide, killing numerous farm animals. In Oregon, 100 people were poisoned by a group of religious extremists trying to affect the outcome of a local election when they planted salmonella in restaurants. While these may seem modest in the scope and magnitude of their impact, the point is that mankind today is very capable of using these tactics, but now on a grander scale. Today, farmers are preparing for outbreaks of hoof and mouth disease, anthrax, and avian flu. With the enormous amounts of chemical and biological weapons that have been created by terrorist states, and with America's long and open borders, our national food supply at the grassroots level is at risk. Biological weapons, with Muslim extremists within our own country, driven by a blinding hatred, compose the ingredients for a catastrophic attack on our national food supply. Dr. Ganadev, director of Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, one of the newest and most sophisticated hospitals in the country.
This facility was built by County of San Bernardino in 1998, and the biggest attraction for this facility is that it can withstand 8.4 earthquake. It's self-sufficient if there is a large disaster in the area, that it can have its own water supply, it can generate its own power, it can be completely isolated from the rest of the area for 3 to 7 days. So that gives significant value to this facility as an emergency preparedness facility. The difference with chemical attack is more or less decontamination, and biological is isolation. So that's the main difference. Biological attack is isolation, and then management of the people who are exposed to the attack. Compared to chemical attack, mostly it's decontamination and treatment of the symptoms and signs of chemical intoxication. The biological and chemical weapons can be dispersed by sophisticated dispersing mechanism. They can be dispersed as low clouds where they can potentially spread to that local area very easily compared to 1950s and 60s. If that happens, we really have to get the assistance of the state and the federal government, the FEMA. I can't recall too many hospitals in the country who can be standalone facilities without power, without water supply, and without sewage disposal for any significant length of time. So I don't know the number, but there are not too many.
Dr. Prendergast, Director of the Public Health Department for the County of San Bernardino, the largest county in the United States.
Well, certainly not everybody is prepared, and there's a wide variety. There are some who have thought through this and decided what they would do, and probably some people who have thought ahead, have laid in some extra food, extra water, made the preparations that they should make, and others who will react, and probably everything in between. How we respond depends on what happens, and it's the devil's in the details. If we wind up dealing with an explosive device, that's one thing. If it's a radiation device, that's another thing. If it's one of many biological agents, it depends on which agent, how it's released, and how many people are affected. And so I don't know whether it's inevitable or soon to happen that there will be some kind of another effort to use a weapon of mass destruction. Some things we can prepare fairly well for. Some things, if they're far enough away, can occur and not affect us at all, and some things we would really have to struggle to respond to. If you're unfortunate enough to be right where somebody releases a smallpox, then we basically have 3 days to deliver smallpox immunization to people before they get too widely dispersed, so we can do that. And it's 95% effective if you can do it within 3 days. If you can do it within a week, it's probably 75% effective. So we have some time, and that's what we do. With another agent like anthrax, if there's anthrax exposure like there was on the East Coast with the letters that were sent, we have a few days to start prophylaxis with an antibiotic. Antibiotics work against anthrax, they don't work against smallpox. On the other word, smallpox is communicable, so we have to worry about that. We may have to isolate people until we make sure they don't come out with the disease. We don't have to do that with anthrax because it isn't communicable. But we can treat people with antibiotic and keep them from developing symptomatic anthrax if we get there fast enough, if we know what we're dealing with. The question about smallpox vaccine is, and others, how long are they good for? And nobody knows that with absolute certainty, but the general answer has been we think smallpox vaccine becomes less effective after about 5 years. And so people who haven't had it in that length of time are asked to be revaccinated if in fact we think they're going to be part of the team that would be exposed if an initial case were to occur in this area or any place in this country that we might have to respond to. If somebody were to figure out how to disseminate plague as an organism that can cause an infection that is terribly serious for the people who have it and also communicable to other people, that certainly would require a major response. Once you've identified what you're dealing with, plague is just one more organism that we can treat and deal with compared to what it was capable of doing in the 1300s. It's supposed to have wiped out a third of the entire civilized world. And nothing like that is going to happen now, but an initial case or a number of cases that were caused by some kind of dissemination are conceivable. Immediately after figuring out what it is, we start reacting to it, and we can do a great deal to treat people who have it and to prevent additional people from getting it. If it's the wrong kind of chemical and you're at absolute ground zero when the chemical is released, you can be killed. That's not part of the disaster response, that's the disaster. If there's a chemical release, you need to keep in contact with the people that are disseminating information. If there's a cloud of toxic chemical, it may very well be that the smartest thing you can do, find out what's going on and stay inside. Don't recirculate a lot of air through your house and let the thing go over, and you'll be safest that way than anything else you can do. At ground zero of a nuclear attack, people, buildings, all kinds of things are destroyed, and certainly if anybody has the capability of doing that to us, using a nuclear weapon is a major issue for anybody to deal with and to respond to. The greatest danger, the greatest hazard is from the initial exposure, the initial explosion. By the time you disperse the radiation over a much wider area, through a much bigger volume, what you wind up with is less and less radiation as you get further away from the initial explosion. And if you weren't hurt by that, the chances that the radiation itself is enough to do damage all by itself is not very great. You can measure radiation and you can tell down to very small levels that there has been an increase in radiation, and the impact of that is expected to be that people will panic, and they may very well to some extent, but the actual damage, the actual health impact of diluted radiation spread over a large area is not really likely to be very great compared to just the explosion that set it off in the first place. At the moment, we are engaged in a process of immunizing public health people, medical care people, and a limited number of people who would be involved in an initial response so that we could investigate a possible case should one be reported or should it occur, so that we could have a place where they could be taken care of by medical people who had already been immunized, and so they wouldn't be being exposed for the first time. And also we've immunized a bunch of people who can then turn around and immunize others in an area where there might be smallpox transmission and they would be safe. Nobody else at this point really needs to be immunized based on anything we know today. The only good advice you can give is pay attention to what's being said, stay calm, and make your best choices. I don't think you can say ahead of time everybody ought to get out or everybody ought to stay in, because it depends on how the release takes place or how the exposure is occurring. if you go out among a bunch of people, you may be at greater risk than if you just stay home. And I can easily imagine a circumstance where our advice would be, even for people who had been exposed, tell us and stay home. And we'll check you there, or we'll keep you quarantined in that place until we find out whether or not you're going to develop smallpox, and we'll try to set up a way to treat you then. But we don't want people to panic and leave. That could involve exposing people far away that wouldn't have been exposed otherwise. We don't want people to become so fearful that they don't tell us that they're afraid they've been exposed, because then we wouldn't know that they needed help. But I think if people just pay attention to the instructions that come through the emergency communication systems and through the news media and work with us, we have a pretty good chance of dealing with an awful lot of issues.
Preparation is minimal emergency preparedness. You do have to have minimum food, medication, which can be available for a few days, and help others when they need, and follow the guidelines.
Doctor, have you yourself been vaccinated?
I was vaccinated 3 days ago, and every once in a while my arm's itching right now, but other than that, it's okay.
What was your reaction when you learned about the World Trade Center bombing?
I was kind of a bit happy that someone at least have done something to America.
How could there even be any part of you that was at all happy?
The Americans, they were too proud of themselves. After this attack, they are going to take us seriously, or the Muslims.
We've covered agricultural, biological, chemical, and nuclear terrorism. But unfortunately, there's more. This one is of another kind. Two leading commodity experts, Don McIlvaney and Craig Smith, exposed the covert economic attack on our financial system. We managed to catch up with both of them at their favorite retreats in Southern California.
Now, Craig, in my opinion, this is a very interesting time to be alive. There are so many changes in the winds right now. Now, something that some people may not know, but you seem to know a lot about, is that Muslim states have recently introduced a gold-backed currency called the dinar. In your opinion, do you see this as being a covert means of economic terrorism?
Boy, what a question. Yeah, I really do. And let me tell you why, because it just, you know, I believe in common sense, Charity. When you see things that just are fitting a certain way, you have to apply common sense to it and say, this can't be happening by mistake, it has to be happening by design. The Arab nations announced that by the year 2005, they will refuse to take payment for their oil in anything other than the new dinar. Now, the dinar is planned to be backed 100% by gold. Thus, they're going to only take payment in the form of gold.
The Arab world and the Muslim world have long been against our financial system based on interest rates, usury, and so forth, and I believe the Quran is very much against interest. So they have always been very pro-gold. This was true back in the 1970s. It's been true for centuries. And so for the Arabs to want to move, and the Muslim world to try to move towards gold, the usage of gold, the accumulation of gold, gold backing behind a currency, is not really surprising. Now, they also know that they believe their number one enemy is the United States of America, and hence the US dollar is a target.
They know that the banks in America are terribly short the gold market, meaning that the banks owe the gold market tons and tons of gold that they do not have. Now, if they have to go out and replace that gold at, say, $350, it's going to cause X amount of damage to the banks. But what if they had to replace that gold at $1,000 an ounce or $2,000 an ounce? It would cripple the American banking system. And I happen to believe that the Islamic nations, if left unchecked, could bring this nation to its knees financially with a terrorism that in my mind is equal, if not greater, than the threat of biological, radiological, or chemical warfare. But I think one of the most powerful weapons that the terrorists hold against us is the ability to mess with our very vulnerable money system. And here's why. Most people won't realize it's happened till after it's happened.
So is this the very reason that Alan Greenspan recently hinted at a gold cover for our currency?
Absolutely, Charity. There is no doubt in my mind that Mr. Greenspan, with his intelligence and his understanding from a historical perspective, because you got to remember, he came in after Paul Volcker, who was the famous inflation fighter, but when they finally lost the battle of inflation, Mr. Volcker resigned and Mr. Greenspan took over.
Alan Greenspan was a gold bug back in the 50s and 60s and wrote very positive things about gold as an integral part of the world monetary system. However, since becoming the Federal Reserve chairman, he has been the most inflationary Fed chairman in the history of the Fed.
What would happen to our currency in specifics if it's not backed by gold?
You would have 1919 style inflation.
The U.S. dollar is falling apart. It's in a long-term bear market, and as the dollar goes, so probably will America's superpower status, at least on a financial basis, go in the next few years. What will replace it? Well, will the Chinese currency replace it or the euro replace it? Some kind of gold backing in the world monetary system is coming. You see this with the Arab dinar. You see this with China's rapid accumulation of gold today, and I think Greenspan recognizes that as a trend. So some partial usage of gold in our financial system is probably in our not too distant future.
If you take the scenario out far enough and it is left unchecked, it'll be devastating.
So things are changing very, very rapidly, and gold will be an integral part of the new world monetary system that is emerging. Where the gold goes in the next few years is where the political power in the world will go. And the political balance of power is shifting from America to China and the Far East, much as the financial balance of power is shifting from America to China and the Far East, much as the financial balance of power in the early 20th century shifted from England to America. America is at the threshold of ceasing to be a great world financial power. We will not be the lone or the only financial superpower in the world in the next few years. So where gold goes is where the financial power of the world will go.
They say the glory of a nation is in the face of its youth, and a wise sage once said, "You can know a tree by its fruits." Children reflect their parents' ideas and values. In Muslim countries, much like the Hitler Youth Program, children are raised up with a malignant purpose to destroy Jews and establish a global theocratic state. For over 13 centuries since the building of the Dome of the Rock, the West has endured the relentless hostility of the Islamic nations. History is pockmarked with the scars of their eternal hatred, as each succeeding generation rises to do battle with what they call the Great Satan, even the murder of their own people. Should we expect figs from an orange tree, or can an evil tree produce good fruit? Even though we have witnessed a regime change in Iraq, should we merely go back to sleep and turn away from the historical record? Do we dare make the assumption that the worst is over, only to awaken to another nightmare, greater than the horrific tragedy of 9/11? This perpetual hatred, century after century, handed down from father to son and daughters, ensures that the next wave of terror is securely embedded in the coming generation.
What was your reaction when you learned about the World Trade Center bombing?
I was a bit happy that someone at least have done something to America.
How could there even be any part of you that was at all happy?
The Americans, they were too proud of themselves. After this attack, they are going to take us seriously, or the Muslims.
These younger boys told us Osama bin Laden is their hero.
What he did to America was right.
They deserved it, not the civilians. America deserved it.
If I was Osama bin Laden, I would have ordered the killing of many more people.
Was there any satisfaction in the World Trade Center bombing?
You have brought the world's greatest power to their knees for a minute because they're devastated and they don't know what to do.
And that felt good?
Good in a way, yes.
Over the centuries, this continuous cycle of hatred has become a corporate pathological phenomena in the Muslim people. And just like the season that brings the snow and the rain and then the spring blossom, a harvest of bitter fruit will surely come, sooner or later. The seed has been deeply planted.
We need to realize that these terrorists are not deranged lunatics. These are not lone assassins acting alone. These are people that are well-trained, well-educated, and fully committed to their religion. They believe that they are in the service of the God they worship. They believe that their rewards will be given to them after death if they die in the service of Allah, killing infidels. This is what jihad is all about. This is what Islam is all about. The Quran is a warrior code, and their agenda is the domination of the planet Earth by the sword if necessary.
The Muslims have a worldview that is very similar to the Christians, but their means of conversion is diametrically opposite.
The world is divided into two sides, the side of faith and the side of infidelity. Now, every Muslim has to stand up and support Islam and support Muslim brothers in order to wipe out this aggression.
The seed of hatred is rooted in the teachings of the Islamic holy book, the Quran. The Quran's fundamental teaching is that the world is divided into two camps, those of the faith and the infidels. By force, jihad, or holy war, all the peoples of the world must come to accept Allah.
Surah 475 says, quote, "Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah." Surah 812 says, this is Allah speaking, "I will instill terror into the hearts of the infidels, strike off their heads." Surah 29:30, "Declare war upon those to whom the scriptures were revealed, but believe neither in Allah nor the last days."
Today we are going to learn the letter J for jihad. J and I makes G. We add D to spell jihad. Now jihad is our duty.
The youth, indoctrinated with the teachings of the Quran from the earliest ages, are geared up to make jihad. The Muslims are taught by their holy book to conquer all peoples and make the nations of the world adherents to Allah and Islam. But Islam is far from being a religion of peace.
They keep telling us that Islam is peace. I would like one example, just one. Give me one example where Islam ever brought peace. It never brought peace. Right from the beginning, Muhammad didn't give peace to anybody except those who submitted to Allah at the point of a sword.
While the youth, at an early age, are indoctrinated into the tenets of Islam, it is up to the political will and the force of the leaders to exhort and extol the virtues of their great religion.
The United States will have no peace until every sinner, every Israeli leaves the Palestinian lands.
فاليهود هم اليهود ولن يكون فيهم معتدل ولا داعية للسلام فكلهم كاذبون. هؤلاء هم الذين يجب أن يذبحوا ويجب أن يقتلوا كما قال الله تبارك وتعالى. فهذا هو شأن اليهود، فلا ترحموا اليهود في أي موقع كان وفي أي موطن. قاتلوهم أينما كنتم حيثما ثقفتموهم فاقتلوهم أينما تكونون فاقتلوا أولئك اليهود ومن لف لفهم من الأمريكان ومن وقف معهم فإنهم جميعا في خندق واحد ضد العرب والمسلمين.
The question we should ask ourselves is this. After seeing the true face of Islam's blatant behavior so obvious and their motivation so clear, should we simply ignore 1,300 years of history's record that has raged more fiercely in recent days and do nothing? Let each judge for himself. Dave Sibley of Ready Reserve Foods has been a disaster preparedness expert for over 20 years. He comments on potential terrorist attacks.
Let's go to New York City. The terrorists have detonated a dirty bomb in Lower Manhattan. The city of New York has to be and will be evacuated in a very short period of time. Where's the population of New York going to go? West to Newark, New Jersey. Millions of people will be filing through the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, over the George Washington Bridge on foot because the transportation system has quit working. The people that operate it are going home. They're leaving. They're scared too. Take 3-4 million people, put them in the surrounding area in Newark. How are they going to survive? The infrastructure in Newark cannot absorb that many people. It will take days, weeks, even months for any sort of comfort and supplies to come. Now let's go to Los Angeles. Same sort of situation we had in New York. Panic. It has to be evacuated. As panic and chaos set in into the surrounding suburbs and areas, people are all going to want to leave LA. Everybody's going to want to leave at once. There's not enough resources, time, roads for everyone to leave at once. That in itself is going to create mass chaos and probably a lot of casualties as people that are scared begin to do very uncivilized things. So you have to be prepared. You have to have your own resources and be able to literally go camping on a moment's notice, to be able to be self-sufficient, and there will not be an infrastructure to support you for a while. The average person, depending on the proximity to the threat, how threatened they feel, most people that are not prepared or even thought about preparedness will almost immediately rise to the level of panic. And some of them will actually get very dangerous very quickly. After several days, they could commit some very heinous crimes, maybe even murder, to get what they perceive as resources to keep them alive. There won't be anything to buy. The people operating the stores now are gone. They've locked up and gone home. They may have cleaned the shelves off themselves and locked the door and left. Somebody will break into the store, there'll be rioting, chaos, panic, and a lot of mayhem. That's just human nature. It's the way it's going to unfold. And the government will step in, try to wrest control of the situation. Let's look at the LA riots. All right? That was in a relatively small geographic area and by a relatively small number of people that were causing the problems. There will not be enough law enforcement. This is why you have to be prepared. Be prepared mentally, materially. You have to strategically be prepared. You have to have a strategy of where you're going to go, what you're going to do, a threat you have no control over, to manageable threats or an environment that you have some mastery over by being prepared. I'm going to keep coming back to this being prepared. You have to prepare now. The preparation, the time for preparation is now, not afterwards. Because if you have to prepare, the only way you're going to be able to prepare is by becoming an animal like the rest of them. And people will panic. I know I would panic. See my family threatened like this. People make mistakes is in most situations they either start looking for food or water. Get your shelter first. There's a psychological reason. Now you have a place where your environment isn't as threatening or doesn't threaten you at all. And you now have a home. Believe it or not, that makes a big difference. You have a place where you don't feel threatened. You can stop, you can think, and make a plan. The proper moves in a survival situation and the psychological approach to your survival situation are both equally important.
Have you done anything to prepare for any possible terrorist attacks, you or your family?
Oh, minimal. You know, I just made sure my water supply was good because I buy bottled water, get it out of the machine, and I happened to be in a store where they had duct tape, so I bought some just because it's good to have around, but I don't know, how I would really use it. I haven't done a whole lot.
Have you done anything?
Not a thing.
Are you not concerned, or are you concerned?
Well, I'm not gonna live my life that way. I mean, if something happened, I didn't go out and buy duct tape or plastic wrap. I don't watch regular television, so I don't listen to what they say. I listen to KPFK pretty much. And I'm just not gonna, to me, if I start reacting that way, they've already won. So I'm not gonna live in fear.
Have you done anything to prepare for a biological, chemical, or nuclear attack?
None. I haven't done anything, and I don't believe in that.
I think absolutely there will be attacks against all of us.
A world where national friendships that have long endured are strained to the breaking point. How do we face such a world? Sir Edmund Burke, a great patriot, once said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom." Perhaps, if all Americans took his admonition seriously, the sun would never set on this great and wonderful land. May the Eternal Father, working through us all, continue to bless America.
The following are some steps of preparation recommended by both the American Red Cross and the Department of Homeland Security. According to the Department of Homeland Security, all Americans should begin a process of learning about the potential threats so that we are better prepared to react during an attack. While there's no way to predict what will happen or what your personal circumstances will be, there are some simple things that you can do now to prepare yourself and your loved ones. For example, number 1, create an emergency communications plan. It's so important. Choose an out-of-town contact or family member and call or email them to check on each other every so often, especially if a disaster occurs. Your selected contact should live far enough away that they would be unlikely to be directly affected by the same event, and they should know that you are the chosen contact. Number 2, establish a meeting place. Having a predetermined meeting place away from your home will save time and minimize confusion should your home be affected or the area be evacuated. You may even want to make arrangements to stay with a family member or friend in case of an emergency. Number 3, assemble a disaster supplies kit. If you need to evacuate your home or are asked to shelter in place, having some essential supplies on hand will make you and your family more comfortable. Prepare a disaster supply kit in an easy-to-carry container such as a duffel bag or small plastic trash can. Include special needs items for any of the members of your household: infant formula, first aid supplies, prescriptions, a change of clothing, a sleeping bag or bedroll, a battery-powered radio or television with extra batteries, food, bottled water, and tools. It's a good idea to include some cash and copies of important family documents, birth certificates, passports, etc. in your kit. For more complete instructions, please contact redcross.org and get a brochure entitled Your Family Disaster Supplies Kit. Number 4, stay informed. It's so important that you understand what's going on around you by staying in touch through the media, through your favorite television, radio, internet, shortwave, whatever the source that you prefer. Stay informed about what's going on so that you can make good decisions. We recommend visiting redcross.org or Department of Homeland Security at www.ready.gov. And lastly, number 5, take some steps of financial preparedness. It's important that you understand that if we have a crisis similar to 911 or some other type of crisis, the financial markets could be impacted, making it near impossible to get at your money, to get at your investments.